of any chemicals with long words, like something about this fire, or just the I mean, I know they just talked about, I find it hard to believe that a week after we don't have any specific names of chemicals.
I think we are doing our own investigation and to make determination what chemicals are out there. We do know some of the chemicals. We don't know the quantity because that's still being, I guess, compiled. But we're having to go back and kind of do it after the fact. A lot of the stuff was burned, but there's EPA's, TCEQ, along with the city. They're trying to compile get a determination of how much was out there. But in terms of some of the chemicals, I do have some of them. I can make this list available. That would be great. It's kind of hard to read some of the stuff, but we can make available the chemicals that we know. But I just want to tag it by saying we don't know the quantity that may exist. So I don't want anyone to kind of go and kind of Google and then run with that information, because the quantity is very important. So there may be a number of chemicals, but it doesn't necessarily reach the level where it could be dangerous to anyone. I guess that's the point I want to make.
You don't know if there was like 100 barrels or 1 barrel.
That's correct.
Of said product.
That's correct. But I do know, so for example, 1, 2, 3, 6. There are about 7 to 10 chemicals that I know, and the list is much more extensive, but we've just been reluctant to just put it out there, because that doesn't necessarily mean it's at a dangerous level. They've just been, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And do you know yet specifically if the company is in any obvious violations of city code, for example, for not filing the hazardous occupancy permit, or anything that would say, well, had we known, we would have fined them?
For example, if they had chemicals that reached a certain threshold, they were obligated to self-report to TCEQ. We do know that they did not self-report at all. Okay, that we do know. But if, based upon the investigation, they had certain chemicals that reached a certain threshold, and there are different thresholds for the different chemicals, then they would have been obligated to self-report. That's one of the reasons, for example, out there, even today, I think, you have HPD is out there, arson investigators are out there. So everybody is out there. This investigation is still in an early stage to make a determination whether or not any laws or any ordinances were violated. So those determinations have yet to be made.
Would you characterize this company's cooperation right now as being, or would you characterize them having been cooperative or evasive, or are you frustrated, or are you satisfied? Where does your...
Well, let's just say that they have not provided us, for example, with a listing of materials that were out at the facility. They certainly haven't provided us with the amount, the quantity that they had out there. They have lawyered up, from the word that I've gotten, they have lawyered up. So in terms of being forthcoming, I think in my conversations, and I think Councilmember Stardick was there, as well as the city attorney and Harry Hayes, I think what they did not say that they were forthcoming with the information. We've had to glean the information from the data sheets that we let's say had. But in terms of being forthcoming with the chemicals that were out there, the quantity that they had in their possession, that information we're having to glean from our own investigations, and not from them.
What are you planning to do to this not happen again? Are you planning to have more training or more inspections on those warehouses? Do they have some chemicals? What are you planning to do?
I will tell you that HFD, the Houston Fire Department ASMAC inspection, is currently auditing its inspections and re-inspection processes. We know that the facility of concern has not been inspected since at least 2008. They have not registered with the TCEQ for any time period according to TCEQ records. An audit of the department's inspection records has been audited by the interim fire chief based on the fact that we cannot determine if there has been any routine or systematic inspection of any of these facilities. Efforts have been hampered by inadequate record maintenance and information retrieval ability, decades of incorrect code enforcement, and inappropriate historical awarding of hazardous occupancy certificates. Now, this particular business did not have a hazardous certificate of occupancy, and it was not registered with the city as a hazardous enterprise. So we certainly need, and we're doing an audit of the entire inspection process. So we need more inspections. We need a better determination of what businesses or facilities have. When you don't have zoning, people really need to know better of what they may be living next door to. And so we need to better coordinate our efforts with TCEQ to make sure that we are all getting as much information as the general public should have a right to have.
About the healthy issues.
sorry?
About the healthy issues. What do you say to the neighbors, that they're concerned about
I think the people from TCEQ and from EPA and Dr. Peirce and Dr. Carson answered those questions earlier today. When it comes to the air quality, I think there have not been any dangerous levels that have been detected. With respect to the water quality, other than the wells, because they really have not, let's say, tested the well water, from all indications, they're still proceeding with those tests. And I think they're going to, I think there are some more test results that will be coming in by the end of the week. But from all indications, especially as it relates to air quality, there have not been any dangerous levels detected.
Mayor, you mentioned that at a certain threshold, companies are required to self-report to the TCEQ.
Yes.
What is the threshold for them to need to get a hazmat occupancy permit?
And that's what complicates this. There are different thresholds for different chemicals. So and there are a lot of chemicals that appear to be involved in this particular facility, but the threshold differs. Now, TCEQ refers to this Tier 2 status for hazardous reporting, and if you reach Tier 2, then you must self-report. And in this particular case, this company had not reported to TCEQ. And then what ends up happening, for example, when firefighters are going to a particular location, they would pull up, they would access TCEQ data to make a determination as whether or not the company was there, so they would know what they would be fighting. And in this particular case, in trying to pull up the information, since they had not self-reported, TCEQ had nothing on this company.
Does the city base its requirements on hazardous occupancy, for a hazardous occupancy permit, on whether the company has had to self-report to the TCEQ, or is there a totally separate process?
In large part, they report to TCEQ, and then the cities then access that database. Now, there is a question as to whether or not the city should do more than that, and we've certainly taken a look at it. But I do know that in the past, when the city has done more than is required, than what businesses are required to do at the state level, specifically as it relates to TCEQ, the Supreme Court has struck down when the city has been more vigorous in its enforcement.
So just to clarify, the city looks at the TCEQ Tier 2 data and then says to the company, you need a hazmat certificate of occupancy from the city?
Now, that I'm not certain, and I don't want to speak too soon on that. Are you familiar with that one?
The city fire code is distinct from state and federal requirements. So the TCEQ Tier 2 rules are a synthesis of federal EPA and federal regulation requirements and whatever the state deems appropriate. Our fire codes are an independent set of ordinances and regulations that are independently constructed, and they, again, are complex because they depend on the nature of the occupancy, the timing at which a permit is sought, whether a permit is sought in connection with a change of use or not. And so there isn't always going to be a one-to-one overlap. And the purpose of fire code ordinances isn't necessarily coextensive with regular EPA and TCEQ regulatory objectives.
And are companies required to self-report to and apply proactively for this hazardous occupancy permit through the city?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to you're supposed to get permitting for various occupancy requirements. So if you go get a permit pulled, in that respect, you're self-reporting. If they change their purpose over the years and do something completely different than they were originally doing, or scale up, and they don't come to us and seek a permit, there's no process by which we would know what they're doing unless we happened onto the property.
Well,
And I think a fair question is whether or not we should be requiring even more during the, and we are taking a look at that. And I think I think that's very fair as to whether or not we should be requiring more, specifically as it relates to when they're seeking a permit from the fire department, when they are listing whether or not there's hazardous material, whether or not we should be requiring more information to be provided. So that's one, and we're taking a look at that. The second is we certainly need to do more inspecting, because the last time this facility was inspected was in 2008. So we need to take a look at that. All of this is, of course, is tied to resources, and I think one of the reasons why that the city hadn't been doing as many inspections is I think this is the area where there have been some budgetary cuts in the past. At least that's what I've been told.
How often do you think the city should be inspecting hazardous material sites?
I can't give you an answer right now. I do anticipate putting together a task force specifically to look at this particular area. I think what this fire has demonstrated and the aftermath is that we need a lot more information. And so I'm certainly going to be asking the Committee on Public Safety to kind of drill down even more. I think this is signal that we need to address it. Because if you had told me that the last time this company was inspected was 2008, that would have raised all type of flags. So I think we do need to really take note of what has taken place and ask a lot more questions, and where it's necessary to require more information, and at the minimum require more information and do more inspections, then I think we need to look at doing that. But I'm going to ask the committee to drill down and to come up with some specific recommendations. There are a lot of things we don't know. Let me just put it that way, okay? And then whether or not a company should what happens if a company doesn't provide the information? Let's say the firefighters are out there, we're on the scene. Obviously somebody should be there to say, this is what we have and this is the quantity. And if you can just remain silent and not provide that information, and you're putting first responders at risk and everybody in the community at risk, then that poses some problems. But that's why you have the command units that have been out there with EPA, TCEQ, the City of Houston, along with police and arson and all of them that are taking a deep look at this whole situation. It does.
Our state's not really well known for a lot of these regulations. I mean,
Sure.
the West Fire, I think they're going to reveal the cost today. A lot of people died in that. Nothing
Sure.
changed after that. So, I mean, it's all great that you're talking about all these things that you're going to go look at. How realistic, I mean, we're probably not going to get zoning. We're probably not going to get, so how realistic do you think more stringent requirements, more stringent inspections, more effective management of hazards, how realistic are all those lofty goals?
Well, fair enough, because I think there's a battle that's even brewing right now. How much should locals be allowed to control or to oversee things that are happening in your particular local jurisdiction? And so there's an issue now between what the locals can do and what's preempted by the locals, how locals are being preempted by the state. I do think this is, and one of the reasons why we wanted to have all of the individuals speak today during the city council meeting, because I think it's important for you to hear the information, it's important for the city council members to have heard the information, and it's important for the general public to hear the information, to really highlight the importance of this issue. Yes, there's this tension between whether or not what TCEQ does and its oversight preempts the City of Houston, for example, of doing more. I think this is an area that the City of Houston, by virtue of being the fourth largest city, everything that we have, no zoning, that we can't just sit back and not do anything. So this is one area where I'm going to encourage us to kind of push the ball. But I do know the last time that the city decided to do more in terms of the environment, like on air, that went all the way up to the Texas State Supreme Court, and they slapped the city's hand and said, you cannot go beyond the state. And then this should be an issue that we put as a part of our legislative governmental packet to make sure that the state and the cities are operating on the same, that we're all moving forward together. At the very minimum, we should know what hazardous materials and the quantity that people are operating with when they're next door to you. And self-reporting, I don't know if that does very much for you, okay? And if we're going to call for self-reporting, then there should be some stiff penalties if you don't self-report, and we then discover that you had reached that threshold level and you didn't report.
Ask you something about the
Yes, sir, and then I'm coming to you. Yes, sir.
In connection with that, what is the current maximum penalty for failure to self-report, either under state or the local rules?
That I don't know. Ron, do you know that?
So I'm advised that under the fire code, the maximum citation amount is $2,000. I haven't read the ordinance myself, but that's what I understand to be the case. I do not know what the maximum fines are at the state or federal level.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Could you talk about the agenda item number 16, the center point application? What was that about?
That's the GRIP filing. In the last legislative session, the legislature made a change where you will allow the transmission distribution companies to increase their rates without necessarily going through a rate case proceeding. And in this case, CenterPoint has come to the city of Houston and has said that we intend to increase their rates based on various investments that they have made on their distribution line, so to speak. And the amount of their increase, I think it's right around $60 million. And then they're minusing out one-time credits of about $11 million. And then they've indicated that's one time, and so the next year will go back up to 60. And that's a substantial increase. When you compare it to the previous year, I think their request was 15, and then through settlement negotiations, it went down to 13. And our lawyers are taking a look at it, going through the discovery, trying to make a determination whether or not it's justified, whether or not it's too much. And so the action today was simply saying that we need to take time to challenge it, and we're not agreeing to it, because we're still making a determination. And I think the arguments are going to be heard, I think, in Austin on May the 25th. So basically, it's a city taking the position that at this point in time, we don't have sufficient information to say that what you're requesting is reasonable.
I think CenterPoint says a gradual increase would be preferable to a one-time bigger increase. What do you think about that argument?
Well, I think we need to make a decision. The city needs to make a decision as to whether or not we believe that it's reasonable. And at this point in time, based on the information that we have, we're not in agreement with that. The next rate case probably won't be until about 2018, 2020, somewhere within in that time span, which means the ratepayers, the customer, will be paying that. I think to the degree that we can challenge it, and to make sure that it is a reasonable request, then I think we need to do that. So I want to make sure that what's being asked for is reasonable, and we need to do our due diligence. And we are still in the process of doing that due diligence.
Mayor, last question. Any update about the Safe Clear program?
Any update?
What's going to happen with the Safe?
Well, you had 3 items that were on the calendar today, and those 3 items were tagged. I think people wanted more information about it, and I think primarily they were tagged on the due process argument. Wanted to make sure that everybody was given adequate due process, and I think eventually they'll come back and some action will take place. We're waiting to see what that action is, but I anticipate that there will be some action taken.
Can you just talk about why you put these on the agenda, what that's about?
Because, well, we need the city council to take a look at it, and we'll recommend so that action be taken as it relates to this particular item of business that's a part of the Safe Clear program. I think legitimate questions have been raised, and city council needs to address it, address them.
What kinds of questions have been raised? Can you talk about that?
Well, the questions have been whether or not people were, for example, consumers were taken advantage of and being overcharged, being asked to sign things that they did not agree to or did not have a clear understanding of. There are a number of issues that have been raised. And I think it raised to the point of view what I felt it was justified to put on the agenda and for action to be taken. I think the only concern now by members of City Council, they want to make sure that we are affording everyone due process. And I got that and I understand that, but I do anticipate some action being taken.
Mayor, just real quick, have you talked to anybody at Uber since everything that happened, or they said anything about what may or may not happen in Houston?
You're such a good reporter. I talked to some of the high reps on yesterday.
And what they say?
They are saying that they would want to do business in the city of Houston. I said that I want them to do business in the city of Houston, but it's important that we maintain the public safety of people in the city of Houston, and fingerprinting was an important component. And what I indicated to them, if there are other things where we can work with them, the city of Houston is more than willing to work with them. So if it's a question of trying to expedite the permitting process, I'm willing to take a look at that. If they're saying that it's costing too much to get a permitting, I'm willing to take a look at all of that. I'm willing to take a look at anything that will help to expedite the permitting process to allow them to have more drivers, but I'm not interested in sacrificing public safety. We simply had, we just took, they stated their case, I stated mine. I can't tell you anything, nothing has moved.
They didn't say like, hey, we're going to try a proposition thing in
No,
Houston?
they did not. They did not. They simply, they indicated that, that the current system for them was not a workable one, and that Houston was a major player, not only in the state of Texas, but in the country. And I indicated, I certainly understand that. Houston is a major player in the state and in the country. And public safety is an important concern. So it was a respectful conversation, but I cannot tell you that anybody's position was changed.
And Mayor, just have to ask you here a question, sure. Because it's back in the news now, transgender issues, transgender rights issues. Mm-hmm. Also, the most recent Houston area survey showed that I think 79% of Houstonians want an equal rights ordinance. So I know you're focused on the budget and potholes and all that, but what is your stand at this point?
You know, budget, potholes, recycling, Uber, Safe Clear, pensions. You know, there are a number of issues that I think that we have to deal with. Let me just say, I think what the study revealed is that people in the city of Houston don't want to discriminate against anyone in the city of Houston based on group dynamics. I certainly support that position. But in terms of what items will be addressed in the near future, I think the plate is quite full, and I want to deal with those things that are on the plate right now. And there are many things that are on the plate right now.
Question, just one other detail. Okay. Last week, the police department held a press conference, and the county attorney was there. My understanding was that several of the people involved in that business have been arrested or charged, and that the matter is already going toward the courts. Does that not address the due process matter if the courts are already taking care of it?
No, just because, I mean, everybody is entitled to due process, and everyone is entitled to, just because one is charged doesn't mean that you will be convicted.
I agree. I mean, the question is that already there are matters that are going through the normal process.
Well, I think the members of City Council, at least those who tagged it, want to make sure that that everyone is afforded due process. I can understand that.
Okay. Thank you.
I can understand it. Okay? Thank you also very much.